In this video, I'm going to help you solve some of the equations in homework number 2. Now, I'm not going to solve every single equation on the worksheet here because some of them look very similar, but I will solve one of each different looking type of question. So let's start here with question number 1. You'll notice that there are some parentheses here or some groupings. And in the order of operations, you do perform grouping math first, but when it contains a variable, you can't actually perform the operation. So the only way to get rid of these parentheses here would be to distribute this coefficient of 3 to each term inside the parentheses. So that is 1r. So 3 times 1r is 3r. And then we distribute the 3 times the plus 4, and 3 times a positive 4 would be positive 12. Now I don't do any more multiplying because I have completed the items inside the quantity here. So I rewrite my equal sign and I rewrite my answer 24. Now in this question we have two terms on the left-hand side. One that we call a variable term and the other one that we call a constant term. When you're trying to isolate the variable r, you typically get rid of the constant term first because it's easier in that order. So we're going to do the inverse operation of adding 12. So we're going to subtract 12 from both sides, and that is a subtraction property of equality. We're being fair. One's to the left side and one's to the right side. So I'm going to cross off my inverses here on the left side, and I'm going to rewrite my question. 3r is equal to 24 minus 12, which is 12. And now this 3, this coefficient of 3, is multiplying the variable r, so we're going to do the inverse there, which would be to divide by 3. And that gives us our final answer of r is equal to 4. All right, let's try the same task again with number 2. So with question number 2, we're going to distribute 4 times a, which is 4a, and distribute 4 times 2, which is positive 8, and rewrite our equal sign and our answer. Now we're going to subtract our constant here from both sides, and we're going to cross off our inverses and rewrite what's left over. Now here you got to be careful. If you're going to use a calculator, you're going to enter a negative 16 and a subtraction of 8. If you want to use your integer rules, it's that if you have the same signs when you're combining integers, you're going to add them together. And you take the sign of the larger number, so negative 24. Now we're going to divide by our coefficient and write our final answer. A is equal to negative 24 divided by 4. All right, let's take a look at question number 3 here. Now question number 3 has a coefficient that is a denominator, so that's different than what we had before. But there are no parentheses, so I don't need to distribute. So I'm going to use my additive inverse here and subtract 1 from both sides. And now when I rewrite my expression on the left side here, x divided by 4, I see that the operation is dividing by 4. So the inverse of that operation would be multiplying by 4. Now I'm going to use parentheses. You could use a dot, right? I'm going to use parentheses to show that I'm multiplying both sides of the equation by 4. So x is equal to 80. All right. Now I want to erase this work for a second and show you solving this problem in a different order. So you don't have to do your subtraction or addition first. If you'd like to clear this denominator first, you could, but you have to be very careful when doing that. Don't forget that when you perform that property of equality, you do it to the entire side. So if I actually wanted to undo dividing by 4, and I would be multiplying by 4, I would be multiplying the entire side by 4. The entire side by 4. So you could do that if you like. But remember, you multiply both quantities. So 4 times x is 4x, and 4x divided by 4 is 1x. And 4 times 1 is 4. And don't forget I have to multiply this whole side. 4 times 21 is 84. And then I'm going to subtract 4 from both sides. And I'm going to get x is equal to 80. Same answer. All right, let's take a look at these bottom two here. Number 4 is also a distributing problem, but you'll notice that what I'm distributing this time is negative. So negative 2 times 4 is negative 8w. Negative 2 times 4w is negative 8w. Negative 2 times a positive 6 is a negative 12. And I don't distribute to this 8 here. I do not. It is not contained inside the parentheses, so I'm going to just rewrite it at the end of my sentence. All right, now this is different than our last few problems because our left side of the equation has 1, 2, 3 different terms. And the most you can have is 2, a variable term and a constant term. If you have a third term or a fourth term or a fifth term, it can be combined with one of these other two. So since I have 2 constant terms here, I'm going to combine them together. I'm not going to do an inverse. I'm combining. So that means I'm going to simplify these two here. So I'm going to rewrite my negative 8w, and I'm going to simplify these two here that have same signs into a negative 20. Now I'm going to add 20 to both sides, and then I'm going to cross off my inverses, and then I'm going to finish with the multiplicative inverse. W is equal to negative 5. All right, let's try this again, distributing here, but this time let's distribute a fraction. So we're going to multiply 1/3 times 6x. That's what we're doing, right? 1/3 times 6x. And when you multiply a fraction, you can only multiply numerator times numerator and denominator times denominator. So if we're going to do that, then when I multiply 1/3 times 6x, 1/3 times 6x, I'm going to multiply 1 times 6, but not 3 times 6. No, because 3 is in the denominator. So 1 times 6 is 6, and now we're going to divide, right? 1 times 6 is 6, and now we're going to divide by 3. So 6 divided by 3 is 2x. So all of this simplifies down to this nice whole number. 1 times 6 is 6, divide by 3 is 2. Now we're going to do the same thing with the 12. 1/3 times negative 12 is negative 6. Negative 6 divided by 3. Negative 12 divided by 3 is negative 4. Rewrite the rest of the problem. Now from here, I think you've got it. Add 4 to both sides. Cross off your inverse. Divide both sides by 2. Cross off your inverse. And you get your final answer. All right, let's take a look at the next section here. Number 6 is exactly like I just showed you, so I'm going to skip that one and go right to number 7. So with number 7, you'll notice that my variable is the second term, not the first term, right? And it's important that I box out these terms for you so that you can see who gets that minus sign. The minus sign belongs to the w over 2 term, not the 12. The sign of a number has to be in front of it. So there is nothing in front of 12 here, so the sign must be a positive 12. So the inverse of a positive 12 would be minus 12. So be careful there. I see a lot of students thinking that this minus belongs to 12, and then they add to both sides. So be careful. When I rewrite, I bring this minus sign down with my fraction. Now here can get a little confusing for students. So when your negative sign or your minus sign is next to a fraction, I always encourage you to give it to either the numerator or the denominator. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this negative sign into a big long fraction bar, and I'm going to give that negative sign to the 2 because I prefer the negative sign to be with a number. So now the opposite of dividing by negative 2 is multiplying by negative 2. And that eliminates on my left side here, isolating my variable and giving me a final answer of negative 16. All right, question number 8. I have a variable term and a constant term. So I'm going to add 10 because that's the inverse. I'm going to rewrite my left side. And now I'm going to look at this coefficient. Now it is multiplying, so the opposite would be dividing technically both sides, but you don't actually divide by a fraction. If you want to divide by a fraction, which we do, what we would need to do is we would need to multiply by the reciprocal. So instead of dividing by negative 1/5, I'm going to multiply by the flip of that fraction. Negative 5 over 1. So these are inverses, and that isolates my variable. And my answer is negative 5 times negative 5, which is positive 25, divided by 1. So take a look at what I did there with that fraction, right? All right, let's take a look at the next 3. Now number 9 is new. It has a fraction, but it looks different than this type of fraction, right? Because in our fraction we have a math problem. So when that happens, you're actually going to clear the denominator first. We're going to get rid of this dividing by 6 first. So we're going to multiply both sides by 6. And that leaves us with no more fraction. I simply add 3 to both sides. Oh, that was weird. I chose the wrong color. So I'm going to add 3 to both sides. And now I'm finished. All right, let's take a look at number 10. Do you remember who that negative or minus sign belongs to? Not the 14, right? It belongs to the fraction. So the opposite of 14 is negative 14. So I'm going to subtract 14 from both sides, bring down my minus sign, bring down my 2/3, bring down my w, and get my new solution here, which would be negative 26. Now, do you remember what to do with a fraction coefficient? You don't divide by a fraction. You multiply both sides by the reciprocal. Multiply both sides by the reciprocal, right? So you might want to use a calculator here, but what you're going to do on this answer side is you're going to multiply negative 26 times negative 3, and you'll get 78, and then you're going to divide that by 2. So it's a positive 39. Right, so negative 26 times negative 3 and divide by 2. All right, number 11 looks similar to some of the others that we did, so I'm going to skip that question and turn to the back side. Okay, number 12 has 3 terms, and the most you can have is 2. So find the ones that are alike and combine them. Don't use an inverse. So I have a negative 4 and a positive 6. So different signs subtract, take the sign of the larger number, so I get 2 positive 2x. So these are combined. Now bring down the rest of the problem. Now from here it should feel pretty easy. Subtract 2 from both sides, divide 2 on both sides, and get your final answer. All right. Do you remember who gets this minus sign? So it belongs to the fraction. So this is a positive 8, so we're going to subtract 8 on both sides. And then, do you remember what I told you to do when the minus is on the side? Give it to either the numerator or the denominator. It doesn't matter, but I prefer to give it to the number. So the opposite of dividing by negative 2 is multiplying both sides by negative 2. And now we've isolated our variable, positive 28, right? You don't need to write that positive sign, but I wanted you to check to make sure you have the right sign. All right, I think you're pretty good with number 14, so let's take a look down here at the last three. I'll do one more, maybe number 15. Right, we have a constant term, a variable term, so we have only two terms, that's good. Remember, this plus sign belongs to the 4/5, so this 2 is also positive. Subtract 2 from both sides. 4/5 f equals -12. And now don't forget, you don't divide by a fraction, you multiply by the reciprocal. So 5/4 on both sides here, right? So on the left side, these cancel out. And on the right side, we get -12 times 5, which is -60, and then -60 divided by 4. All right, that should help you solve all the questions on homework number 2.